Section 2.1. Legal requirements. Section 2.1.1. Legal documentation that may include, but is not limited to, legislation, Australian standards, codes of practice, industry standards, and compliance codes are identified in the Hallmarc Legal Register. All published acts, regulations, compliance codes, industry standards, and Australian standards are considered minimum Hallmarc standards. Section 2.1.2. The project manager shall, at the commencement of the project, establish a site-specific legal register using the template, or company copy and striking out or adding as required to meet project requirements. Access to legal documentation is available to all interested parties through the Hallmarc Site Manager. This is explained at induction and on the site notice board. Section 2.1.3. Changes and/or additions to the legal register will be communicated to the project team, who will in turn communicate such to subcontractors and workers by way of project apps, email, toolbox meetings, or similar. If such changes necessitate changes to the Hallmarc management system, employees and stakeholders will be informed of the changes and document revisions issued. Section 2.1.4. New and updated information regarding legal documentation will be sourced by the Director Construction and the HSEQ Manager with assistance and prompting of weekly subscription service updates, WorkSafe alerts, etc. This is an ongoing process that must be addressed at minimum 3 monthly intervals. Section 2.1.5. Access to relevant legal documentation will be by way of request to the Hallmarc Site Manager or Project Manager.
Section 2.2. Hazard identification, risk assessment and control. Section 2.2.1. Before the commencement of on-site works, the project manager shall consult with those members of the project team trained in the Hallmarc process to establish a site-specific site risk assessment. Central to the effectiveness of the site risk assessment is the implementation of the hierarchy of control and risk matrix, see Appendix A. The Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment will be signed off in BuildPass by project team members to represent consultation and understanding of the document. Section 2.2.2. The Site Risk Assessment will be communicated to the project team and provided to subcontractors prior to on-site works. The Site Risk Assessment will also be made available to other interested parties. Section 2.2.3. Along with practical instruction, Hallmarc trains its employees in Hallmarc using the Hallmarc Hallmarc training video as a cornerstone. Once considered competent, workers' Hallmarc training is recorded in the training register. Section 2.2.4. Approved safe work method statements are required of all subcontractors and will form an ongoing part of the Hallmarc process. The ongoing compliance of subcontractors will be assessed by the project team. A SWIMS task observation will be completed in BuildPass monthly minimum. Section 2.2.5. Where works have a potential to impact indirect stakeholders such as tenants and the public, Hallmarc will establish a communication process, as appropriate. The potential for such impact will be risk assessed in the same manner as all other works. Section 2.2.6. The Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment requires a low or medium residual risk score for any identified hazard in order for that task to proceed. The task may be further assessed and acceptable controls established to allow the task to proceed. The hierarchy of control and risk matrix are contained in Appendix A of this document. Section 2.2.7. All SWIMs submitted are required to use the hierarchy of control when establishing controls. It is also required that all SWIMs nominate applicable acts, regulations, compliance codes, industry standards, etc. Section 2.2.8. The effectiveness of the Hallmarc process will be evaluated using HSEQ inspections, SWIMS task observations and project meetings.
Section 2.3 Emergency Preparedness and Response. Refer to Part 3 of this plan. Section 2.4. Health Surveillance and Exposure Monitoring. Section 2.4.1. Initial assessment of the worksite for biological, physical, and chemical or atmospheric contaminants will be undertaken by Hallmarc workers trained in Hazard Identification Risk Assessment and Control, or HIRAC. The site risk assessment will assist this process, as will previous survey and investigation documentation. If current documentation is unavailable, an occupational hygienist will be engaged to conduct further surveys. Where hazards are suspected, that work area will be isolated pending an occupational hygienist report. Section 2.4.2. Where a hazard is identified, a project-specific occupational health and hygiene management plan that seeks to identify hazardous substances in accordance with Schedule 9, see Appendix N, will be developed by an occupational hygienist and implemented on site. Workers and subcontractors will be kept informed by way of toolbox meetings or the BuildPass app message function. Section 2.4.3. Where ongoing monitoring is required, the occupational hygienist will develop procedures to address the method and frequency of monitoring, sampling methods, dissemination of results, and nomination of control measures. Monitoring results shall identify the ongoing suitability, or otherwise, of incumbent control measures. Results of monitoring will be made available to workers by way of BuildPass alerts, toolbox meetings, and/or site notice boards. Section 2.4.4. If worker baseline testing and monitoring is required, Hallmarc will engage a qualified occupational hygienist to advise accordingly, particularly with regard to engaging professional medical services. All test and monitoring will be in accordance with applicable legislation, and the results kept confidential. Section 2.4.5. All contractor testing and measuring equipment shall be maintained and calibrated to the manufacturer's specifications. Documented evidence will be made available to Hallmarc upon request. Section 2.4.6. Hallmarc will maintain a safety data sheet register that is readily accessible to all Hallmarc staff. Additionally, hazardous material brought to site by subcontractors will be accompanied by the relevant SDS. BuildPass site software enables registering of these SDSs. Note: all SDSs must be in date, and care taken to replace or renew at maximum 5-year intervals. Section 2.4.7. Subcontractor SWIMs will detail the use and handling guidelines for hazardous material, including PPE and storage requirements.
Section 2.5. Incident investigation and corrective action. Section 2.5.1. It is required of all workers and subcontractors to report all incidents, injuries, and near misses to Hallmarc Site Management. This is addressed in the site induction. All incidents will be managed in accordance with the Incident Notification Flowchart, see Appendix B. Incidents involving emergency services, hospital or medical center treatment, attendance of industry bodies or media must be notified to the project manager as soon as possible, and taking into account the need to treat patients, make safe or isolate the work area and manage the situation as a priority. Section 2.5.2. Other than attending to an injured person and making safe, where an incident is considered notifiable, or there is an expectation that a regulator may attend site, the work area must remain undisturbed, unaltered, and isolated using physical or visual barriers. Section 2.5.3. Incidents will be notified to WorkSafe in accordance with published criteria. Reporting to WorkSafe will only be done by the Hallmarc HSEQ Manager or Director of Construction and Development. Section 2.5.4. The Hallmarc Site Manager or Project Manager will be responsible for notifying emergency services and asset owners as required, and in a timely manner. Asset owners are identified in Section 3.17 of this document. Energy Safe Victoria requires mandatory notification of serious electrical and gas incidents that cause or have the potential to cause death, injury, or significant property damage. Section 2.5.5. Notifiable incidents will be investigated and documented using the Incident Report Investigation function in BuildPass. Investigation will include, but won't be limited to, worker statements, induction checks, SWIMS reviews, and license confirmation. Incident reports will be disseminated to senior management in an effort to determine contributing factors, a root cause, and implement preventative measures where required. All incident investigations in BuildPass automatically incorporate a review of process and procedure. Section 2.5.6. Hallmarc recognizes that a rushed incident report may not be thorough. Notwithstanding this, every effort will be made to investigate incidents and apply corrective actions and learnings in a timely manner. Section 2.5.7. Upon completion of an incident report, any party deemed to have been negligent or otherwise responsible may be issued with a nonconformance report. The nonconformance report will include required corrective measures. Section 2.5.8. The entering of incident data into BuildPass will enable Hallmarc to determine actionable requirements in the future. Actions and improvements will be incorporated into WHS management system documents and revisions issued along with explanatory emails.
Section 2.6. Health and Safety Management System Audit. Section 2.6.1. A minimum of one site safety inspection will take place each week and will be recorded using BuildPass. Corrective actions form part of the process. Section 2.6.2. Site safety inspection will be conducted by the Hallmarc site manager or project manager. Subcontractors will be encouraged to take part in these inspections. Section 2.6.3. All safety inspections can be reviewed by senior management in BuildPass. Senior management will then make determination regarding further corrective action or system changes. Section 2.6.4. A minimum of one HSEQ manager project audit will take place each fortnight and will be recorded using BuildPass. Corrective actions form part of the process. Section 2.6.5. A minimum of one senior manager project audit will take place 3 monthly and will be recorded using BuildPass. Corrective actions form part of the process. Section 2.6.6. Hallmarc's OH&S management systems will be audited annually. The audit process will be led by a senior manager trained in lead auditing. The management system documents in question will be the audit document.
Section 2.7. Senior Management Commitment. Section 2.7.1. Senior management commitment to health and safety will be demonstrated by way of a combination of, but not limited to, senior manager audit, site safety inspection attendance, site toolbox talk attendance, review of project management plans, review of risk assessments. A company director will complete a senior management audit in BuildPass 3 monthly. Section 2.7.2. During construction, OH&S related data is compiled on an ongoing basis in BuildPass. This data is readily accessible by senior management in the BuildPass reporting function. The project manager will also keep senior management informed regarding OH&S issues at scheduled meetings. At the completion of each project, a subcontractor performance review is completed. This review scores the subcontractor on various criteria, including safety, compliance, and performance. This report is also readily available to senior management. Section 2.7.3. In accordance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act 2004 and the Occupational Health and Safety Regulations 2017, where appointed as principal contractor, the organization assumes overall management and control of the construction workplace, and is responsible for coordinating occupational health and safety across the project. Initialing the organization chart, or digitally signing the project management plan indicates acceptance of roles in, and understanding of the project management plan. Section 2.7.4. Hallmarc senior management will be trained in their OH&S responsibilities, and will remain updated as such. Section 2.7.5. Senior management for this project is defined as: insert as required. Section 2.7.6. Senior management receives a Build Pass weekly project update via email. The monthly HSEQ report to senior management in Build Pass is also forwarded.
Section 2.8. Integration of design issues into the risk management process. Section 2.8.1. A safety in design report will be completed during the project pre-construction stage. The report will contain a focus on buildability. The hierarchy of control and risk matrix will remain the presiding controls in this process. Section 2.8.2. In a circumstance that Hallmarc has no or reduced design input, a safety in design risk assessment will be sought from the client during the pre-construction stage. If not supplied, Hallmarc will assume the responsibility of producing a safety in design report. Section 2.8.3. A handover meeting will take place between the design team and the project team prior to commencement of construction. This will be recorded and outstanding safety in design issues will be formally transferred. Unresolved items will be added to the construction site risk assessment. This process remains the same whether the project is design and construct or construct only. Section 2.8.4. The Hallmarc site risk assessment is reviewed both on a regular, monthly, and an as-required basis. As such, design changes will prompt such a review by the project manager who is trained in HIRAC processes. Changes can be relayed by site meetings, email, or Build Pass alerts.
Section 2.9 Whole of Project Consultation. Section 2.9.1. Hallmarc will commit to communicating WHS information to workers, as well as affording workers the opportunity to be involved by raising WHS issues such as work systems and procedures, issues that may have a psychosocial impact on workers, and any issues concerning workplace health and safety. Issues can be raised with management on an ad hoc basis, through a worker representative, or at toolbox meetings. Relevant meeting minutes will be posted on the site notice board or will be freely available on request from site management. Section 2.9.2. The work group or their representatives will be consulted regarding changes to the work environment, work methodology, the introduction of new plant and equipment, and the introduction of new materials and substances that may affect health and safety. Any changes will be risk assessed and communicated to workers by way of a toolbox meeting, scheduled or unscheduled, an alert via Build Pass, and/or the site notice board. Section 2.9.3. Where requested by an elected health and safety representative or a member of the Health and Safety Committee, appropriate training through a registered training organization will be provided. Section 2.9.4. Where a dispute arises, the Hallmarc site manager or supervisor must be notified. The Hallmarc site manager or supervisor shall, where possible, rectify the matter immediately. If this is not possible, affected parties will be informed of the situation and a decision made to stop and isolate works or maintain a status quo. The dispute will then be further assessed by the Hallmarc site manager or supervisor and affected parties. Where a dispute cannot be resolved, the matter may be determined through a relevant regulatory authority. This subject forms part of each site induction. Section 2.9.5. All subcontractor SWIMs submitted to Hallmarc will be assessed against the SWIMS review checklist in Build Pass. Part of this assessment requires evidence of employee consultation in the development of the SWIMs. Only after the SWIMs has been approved by Hallmarc can work commence or proceed. Section 2.9.6. At the request of the workgroup, a health and safety representative must be elected. This process will be in accordance with legislation. In addition to this, the health and safety representative can subsequently request the establishment of a health and safety committee. Such a committee becomes more necessary on larger and high-risk projects.
Section 2.10. Management of subcontractor WHS. Section 2.10.1. Subcontractor selection will include the application of the Hallmarc tender analysis and trade comparison documents. Both documents assess OH&S performance and WHS certifications, and both allow for commentary regarding WHS credentials. As early as possible, and before commencement on site, subcontractors will be issued with an electronic copy of the project management plan and site risk assessment. Subsequent revisions will also be forwarded to subcontractors. Hallmarc may also search subcontractor history through WorkSafe Victoria's prosecution result summaries and enforceable undertakings. See link right. Section 2.10.2. The subcontractor performance review is completed after each project. This assesses the subcontractor on several measures, including a score out of 10 for safety and OHS adherence. This contributes to subcontractor selection. Section 2.10.3. All subcontractors are required to submit safe work method statements that address all high-risk construction works as defined in Appendix C. All subcontractor SWIMs will be assessed against the SWIMS review checklist in BuildPass. If required, Hallmarc will request SWIMS changes of the subcontractor. Works cannot commence until the subcontractor SWIMS has been approved and accepted by Hallmarc. Section 2.10.4. All on-site workers will complete Part 1 of the site induction through the BuildPass app or website. Part 1 of the site induction includes gathering worker details and covers fixed work conditions. Worker details are retained in BuildPass for future reference. Section 2.10.5. All on-site workers will receive Part 2 of the site induction verbally, and by way of an induction video and verbal presentation from an assigned Hallmarc representative on site. Part 2 of the site induction may include specific site information, current site conditions, and detail that new workers on site should be aware of. Section 2.10.6. Site safety inspections require the participation of various workers representing various subcontractors. Those participating will be listed in inspection details in BuildPass. Section 2.10.7. Subcontractor SWIMs will be reviewed to ensure compliance using the SWIMS task observation form in BuildPass. This review will be carried out, minimum, monthly, and will apply to high-risk work. Section 2.11. Project Performance Measurement. Section 2.11.1. Hallmarc uses BuildPass project software to record data at project level and collate this into metadata for high-level review. Section 2.11.2. A project management plan will be developed and made specific to each project. The project management plan will be developed by the project manager in consultation with the project team. The project manager will sign the front cover as well as a director of construction as the approver of the plan. The Hallmarc Director of Construction and Development also accepts overall responsibility for health and safety on the project. The sign-off process can alternatively be completed digitally in BuildPass. Section 2.11.3. The footer of the project management plan will identify the template revision number, the project address, the project revision letter, and the issue date. Section 2.11.4. Page 6 of the project management plan contains a revision and review register. Section 2.11.5 Project objectives and targets are outlined on page 9 of this plan. Tools used to carry out health and safety inspections and audits are contained within the BuildPass app. Such tools include Site Safety Inspection, SWIMS Observations, Senior Management Audits, and Assigned Actions.
Section 2.12. Training Arrangements. Section 2.12.1. The Hallmarc Training Register defines the training requirements of all staff. Qualifications are recorded in the register, and workers are advised when updates or refresher courses are due. As changes in site needs arise, training will be arranged through Hallmarc administration. Copies of training documentation are retained in personnel files. Section 2.12.2. Subcontractor training and qualification requirements will be contained within the subcontractor SWIMS. All workers, when signing on to their company SWIMS, acknowledge that they have read and understood the SWIMS, have been trained for the tasks contained in the SWIMS, and will abide by the SWIMS conditions. All workers are required to upload evidence of qualifications, certificates, tickets, etc. into BuildPass at their induction. Section 2.12.3. Appendix K, Licensing and Training, of this document outlines industry standard training requirements.
Section 2.13. Working at heights. Section 2.13.1. It is acknowledged that falls from height are the most common cause of fatality in construction. Working a height, fall hazards and falling objects will be initially assessed in the Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment. Subcontractors will then describe controls in their SWMs. The Working at Height Hierarchy of Control, Appendix J, will be applied when developing and assessing controls. Section 2. 13.2. Temporary edge protection will be installed in accordance with documentation provided by the supplier and/or manufacturer of the system. The installer must be deemed competent in the use and installation of the system. A ticketed scaffolder or rigger will be also deemed competent. Section 2.13.3. A handover certificate must be provided by the installer. This certificate must clearly state the date, the site, and area on site that the handrail has been installed. Section 2. 13.4. Temporary edge protection will be inspected as a part of all site safety inspections or at minimum 30-day intervals. Section 2.13.5. Workers using a harness system for fall restraint or fall arrest to access areas without guardrail, physical or visual barriers must have completed a recognized Working at Heights course. Such training should be noted in the subcontractor SWMs and evidence of the training uploaded with the worker induction in Build Pass. Section 2.13.6. All working at height equipment is to be inspected prior to works, and inspection records are to be kept by the subcontractor. Working at height equipment, including harnesses, lanyards, and anchor points, require daily pre-use visual checks by users, looking for fraying, damage, or corrosion, and formal, recorded inspections by a competent person every 6 months, or more often in harsh environments. Inspections must comply with Australian Standards 1891.4. Section 2.13.7. Attachment points for lanyards must be designed for the specific purpose of harness attachment and the shock load of a falling person. Such attachment points must be engineer designed and certified by the manufacturer or installer. The attachment points must be installed and inspected 6 monthly by a competent person or an intermediate or advanced rigger. A competent person should be trained to comply with Australian Standard 1891.4. Section 2.13.8. Step ladders are not to be used on Hallmarc sites. Work at low height is to be carried out using platform ladders or mobile scaffold. Workers are informed of Hallmarc's ladder policy at the site induction. Section 2.13.9. Safe methods of access and egress between work levels and for working at height will be assessed using the Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment. Controls may include scaffold tower, as-built stairs, or personnel hoist. Subcontractor SWMs will also detail particular requirements for safe methods of access and egress between work levels and for working at height. Section 2.13.10. All subcontractors working at height are required to include an emergency procedure as part of their SWMs or safety pack. This would commonly include, but is not limited to, rescue from an EWP and rescue from an arrested fall.
Section 2.14. Structural alterations, temporary support structures. Section 2.14.1. Risks associated with structural alterations, structural support systems and temporary structures will be assessed and documented by the design and engineering team. Design drawings and a methodology will be developed and implemented on site under the supervision of the site manager. Hallmarc may also require such a methodology to be provided by a subcontractor and approved by Hallmarc. Section 2.14.2. All on-site work associated with structural alterations, structural support systems and temporary structures will be carried out in accordance with the aligning SWMs, methodology, and engineering requirements. All concurrent risks such as falls and falling objects, plant and training must be controlled simultaneously. Section 2.14.3. All scaffold where a person could fall 4 meters or more, and such scaffold that is considered complex by the industry standard will require design drawings and sign-off by an engineer or qualified person, and an installation handover certificate in addition to a SCAF tag. Section 2.14.4. The Hallmarc tender analysis will identify a suitably qualified subcontractor to carry out site work associated with structural alterations, structural support systems, and temporary structures. Work will be in accordance with design drawings, engineering requirements, as well as all relevant codes, standards, and legislation. After installation, structural support systems and temporary structures will be regularly checked for ongoing integrity. Section 2.14.5. When developing plans and methodology for structural alterations, structural support systems, and temporary structures, consideration will be given to potential emergencies, and emergency procedures established accordingly.
Section 2.15. Excavation. Section 2.15.1. Excavation works will be risk assessed using the Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment template. Additionally, as-built documents, geotechnical reports, dial before you dig reports, potholing, and ground scanning can all be used to assess conditions and the potential to affect nearby structures and assets before issuing a Hallmarc excavation permit. Section 2.15.2. All excavation works are subject to a Hallmarc excavation permit. Subcontractors and operators will not deviate from the work's description and conditions of the permit. No vertical side will exceed 1 meter. Section 2.15.3. In addition to all other conditions, overhead asset risk will also be assessed using the site risk assessment. When necessary, consultation with the overhead asset owner should occur. Section 2.15.5. Excavation and plant operation is defined as high-risk construction works. As such, all excavation and plant operation requires an approved SWIMS. Section 2.15.6. Subcontractors carrying out trenching and excavation work must outline measures to prevent and protect from ground collapse. This is to be detailed in the subcontractor SWIMS. Benching or battering may be applicable. Trench shields and shoring systems must be designed by a qualified engineer, inspected regularly, and have a compliance plate attached. The subcontractor will retain and make readily available the design drawings, engineering reports, and inspection records associated with their shield and shoring systems. Section 2.15.7. Ongoing inspection regarding compliance and effectiveness of risk controls related to trenching and excavation are to be carried out by a competent person. A competent person may be a licensed plumber and drainer, a geotechnical, civil, or structural engineer. Section 2.15.8 Subcontractor SWIMS will describe fall prevention measures around trenches and excavated edges. This may involve visual barriers such as flagging at a minimum 2-meter distance from the edge. Solid protection may also be applicable according to the depth, location, or nature of the excavation. The subcontractor will also ensure safe access and egress systems into trenches and excavations. The SWIMS will be required to meet or exceed requirements of the compliance code for excavation. Section 2.15.9. The subcontractor carrying out trenching and excavation works will ensure that all plant and vehicles, other than their own, are restricted from the work zone. This may be achieved with flagging and barricading, but can be supported by toolbox meetings, pre-start meetings, and electronic site notifications through BuildPass. Vehicles must sit outside the zone of influence or angle of repose. Compliance may also be supported by an on-site vehicle movement plan. Section 2.15.10. Subcontractor SWIMS or safety pack will include a documented process for potential emergencies. Section 2.15.11. Subcontractors and plant operators will abide by the Energy Safe Victoria no-go zones for underground assets as defined in Appendix I of this document.
Section 2.16. Electrical. Section 2.16.1. A licensed electrical contractor will be responsible for developing safe systems of work on electrical installations. This will be documented in a SWIMS. The electrical contractor will, at the commencement of the project, produce and implement an electrical safety survey and management plan. Section 2.16.2. The electrical contractor will consult with the Hallmarc site manager before any isolation, de-energization, or re-energization can occur. The site manager will issue the appropriate permit. Risks and risk controls for such work will be addressed in an approved SWIMS. Site workers will be made aware of any isolation, de-energization, or re-energization by way of toolbox meetings and electronic notifications via Build Pass. Section 2.16.3. By way of an electrical safety survey and management plan, or by the requirements of the electrical installations at construction sites industry standard, the electrical contractor will ensure that all electrical power on site is RCD protected. A certificate of electrical safety must be issued to Hallmarc for all temporary electrical works including temp boards, wiring, lighting and hardwired site amenities. All subsequent and additional work must also receive a certificate of electrical safety. All fixed and temporary works will be carried out and inspected by a licensed electrical contractor. Evidence of qualification and training will be recorded in site inductions. Section 2.16.4. Hallmarc and its subcontractors will ensure that all electrical equipment is tested and tagged at intervals not exceeding 3 months. Testing and tagging will be carried out by a qualified electrician or a competent person with recognized test and tag training and documented accordingly. All residual current devices, RCDs, will be tested and tagged at intervals not exceeding 1 month. Section 2.16.5. The SWIMs provided by the electrical contractor will address emergency and rescue procedures relevant to their scope of works. In particular, rescue of a person working near live parts should be considered.
Section 2.17. Mobile plant. Section 2.17.1. The Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment will be used to identify and control mobile plant hazards. Controls will be in accordance with the hierarchy of control. Any subcontractor operating mobile plant on site will address mobile plant use as high-risk construction works. Hallmarc is to be notified of all plant arriving to site. Plant cannot be operated until a Hallmarc plant induction has been completed. The plant induction will ensure that a risk assessment, logbooks, maintenance records, operator license, and operator manual are provided. Section 2.17.2. The Hallmarc plant induction will ensure the provision of a plant risk assessment. Hazards will be assessed using the hierarchy of control. All controls described in the risk assessment must be implemented. Rollover and falling object protection must remain in place. Section 2.17.3. All subcontractors are required to liaise with Hallmarc site management before commencing in-ground works or overhead works in the vicinity of overhead assets. The worksite will be assessed with a combination of as-built drawings, asset owner documentation, dial-before-you-dig reports, ground scanning and potholing. A Hallmarc excavation permit must be issued for in-ground works and overhead works in the vicinity of overhead assets. Energy Safe Victoria No-Go Zone rules apply to Hallmarc projects. See Appendix H and Appendix I. Section 2.17.4. Tower cranes must be accompanied by a lift plan and engineering documentation. Commissioning, crane capacity, wind loads, lifting equipment, lifting methodology and maintenance should all be documented. A green sticker inspection administered by CraneSafe, the Crane Industry Council of Australia, is required. Section 2.17.5. Mobile cranes must be operated on site in accordance with the relevant SWIMs, lift plans, and risk assessment. All lifting equipment, chains, man boxes, kibbles etc. must carry in-date inspection tags that identify the manufacturer, serial number, working load limit and date of inspection. See Appendix L of this document. Safe working loads must be marked so as to be easily identified on all lifting equipment. A lift plan will be required for complex lifts including tilt-up panels, dual lifts, in the vicinity of live services, the use of complex rigging and lifting equipment, man boxes, and lifts in excess of 90% capacity and greater than 20 tons. The lift plan should include weight, radius, location, required lifting equipment etc. A green sticker inspection administered by CraneSafe, the Crane Industry Council of Australia, is required. Section 2.17.6. When using mobile plant, subcontractors may use a combination of exclusion zones, light and sound warning devices and/or spotters to create separation between plant and persons. Administrative controls may include a combination of SWIMs, vehicle movement plan, site induction, toolbox talks, and site alerts on Build Pass. Section 2.17.7. The Hallmarc induction procedure requires evidence of licensing, training, and qualifications. This will range from a WorkSafe high-risk work license to statements of attainment and verification of competency such as a yellow card for EWP or an earth-moving competency card with an equipment classification such as LE or LS. The subcontractor SWMS is required to detail training requirements for all plant being used. See Appendix K of this document for licensing and training definitions. Section 2.17.8. Mobile plant will be serviced and inspected in accordance with manufacturer specifications. These may be monthly or 3-monthly, for example, or based on hours of use, typically 250 to 500 hours. The BuildPass software will assist in tracking and alerting these requirements after induction. All plant is subject to daily logbook inspection. All maintenance and servicing records are to be readily available. Manufacturer manuals will assist in determining requirements. Section 2.17.9. Subcontractors will include in their SWMS or safety pack an emergency procedure specific to the plant being used and the potential emergencies. Section 2.17.10. Subcontractors and plant operators will abide by Energy Safe Victoria no-go zones for overhead assets as defined in Appendix H of this document. Section 2.17.11. Subcontractors and plant operators will abide by Energy Safe Victoria no-go zones for underground assets as defined in Appendix I of this document. Section 2.17.12. Specific high-risk plant designs must be registered with WorkSafe Victoria before being used in a workplace. Key plant types needing design registration include pressure equipment, cranes, lifts, and passenger elevating work platforms. Registration is mandatory under the OH&S regulations. The Hallmarc plant induction process will prompt these checks. 2.17.13. Craneman boxes used on site must be designed and built to comply with Australian Standard 1418.17. They must have a plant design registration with WorkSafe Victoria. They must have an inspection and maintenance schedule. A SWMS and emergency plan must be in place.
Section 2.18.1. The risk, management and removal of asbestos will be assessed using the Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment and Project Management Plan. Recent hygienist reports will be sought, and if not available, a Division 6 hygienist report will be required. If asbestos is detected, a licensed asbestos removalist will be engaged to follow the instructions for removal or make safe provided by the occupational hygienist. The presence of asbestos will be identified and isolated using warning tape, physical isolation, and regular site communication methods. Section 2.18.2. The Asbestos Management Plan and an asbestos register will be readily accessible to interested parties on site. Section 2.18.3. In accordance with statutory requirements, the occupational hygienist and licensed asbestos removalists will liaise with WorkSafe and the Environment Protection Authority about notification and regulatory requirements. Hallmarc will liaise with any stakeholders affected by the presence or removal of asbestos. All relevant qualifications must be held, and removalist workers licensed in asbestos removal. Section 2.18.4. Hallmarc will require air monitoring to be undertaken during the asbestos removal process. This will be documented in the Asbestos Management Plan. Results will be assessed and changes will be made to the Asbestos Management Plan as necessary. Section 2.18.1. Hallmarc will confirm that all asbestos removal workers have received baseline respiratory testing and ongoing respiratory testing. This will be documented in the asbestos removalist SWMS or safety documentation. Section 2.18.6. Potential emergency situations are to be addressed in the SWMS and/or removal plan. Control measures may include, but are not limited to, isolation, decontamination zones, showers and lockdown procedures. Section 2.18.7. A licensed asbestos removalist must perform most asbestos removal work. The licensed removalist must have training in how to remove asbestos safely. Hallmarc can remove limited amounts of asbestos-containing material without a license. This is only permitted if the asbestos is non-friable and the area of asbestos to be removed does not exceed 10 square meters in total, and total time to remove the asbestos does not exceed 1 hour over a 7-day period. Specific health and safety requirements apply if removing asbestos without a license. These include ensuring people doing the work are trained to remove asbestos safely and provided with appropriate and suitable personal protective clothing and respiratory protective equipment.
Section 2.19. Precast and tilt-up concrete panels. Section 2.19.1. Precast and tilt-up concrete panel risks will be assessed using the Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment along with the hierarchy of control. Risk will be also addressed in a subcontractor SWMS and throughout the design process. Section 2.19.2. All panels will be individually designed and certified by a qualified engineer. The design and engineering of each panel shall include, but will not be limited to, consideration of lifting points, anchoring, propping and bracing. Each panel will be individually identified and carry its own manufacturer's certificate of compliance or birth certificate. Section 2.19.3. The precast panel installers will provide a SWMS to Hallmarc for approval prior to arriving to site. In the circumstance where the crane operator is a separate subcontractor, a separate SWMS will be required. These SWMS should address precast panels as a high-risk category, as well as working at height and plant as high-risk categories. A crane lift plan and a propping plan must be readily available from the panel installers. Section 2.19.3. The crane operator will ensure working load limits and wind limits are observed. The operator will also ensure that all lifting equipment is certified, in date and checked daily. See Appendix L of this document. The crane operator will ensure the induction, serviceability, and safe operation of the crane. The installation crew, and Hallmarc, will ensure the work area is flagged or barricaded from other workers. Section 2.19.5. All props used for the purpose of precast panel erection must be certified and carry a compliance plate. All props must be installed and secured in accordance with engineering documentation. A tamper-proof locking pin system must be used. After installation, props must be protected from plant and vehicles. Section 2.19.6. After installation, panel props must be regularly inspected, minimum as part of each weekly site safety inspection. The connection points, top and bottom, must remain visible and free from material, mud, water, and dirt. Props must be protected from plant and vehicles. Section 2.19.7. All propping points must be in accordance with design and must meet engineer-approved concrete strength before installation. Section 2.19.8. Potential emergency situations are to be addressed in the subcontractor SWMS. Control measures may include but are not limited to rescue at height, equipment failure, and weather events.
Section 2.20. Traffic. Section 2.20.1. The Hallmarc Site Risk Assessment will identify potential risks relating to traffic and pedestrian movement on and near site. This will take into account the Hallmarc HIRAC process and the hierarchy of control. Section 2.20.2. Where required, a traffic management plan will be prepared by a licensed organization. The traffic management plan will be specific to the project and to the various scenarios on the project. All statutory requirements must be addressed in the traffic management plan, including Australian standards and local council requirements. In addition to the traffic management plan, an approved SWMS must also be provided by the traffic management contractor. This SWMS will include detail regarding the safe installation and removal of signage and traffic control devices. Section 2. 20.3. The ongoing compliance of the traffic management plan will be assessed by the site manager on a regular basis. This will include checks for theft, tampering and vandalism. This can be documented using BuildPass tools such as the site diary, site safety inspections, or task observations. Section 2.20.4. Only licensed traffic management contractors will be engaged, and all works will require traffic control and implementation credentials to be provided by a registered training organization that would typically cover units RIISS 00058 and RIISS 00060 as a minimum. Credentials will be recorded as part of the site induction and in the contractor SWIMS a safety pack. Section 2.20.5. The traffic management subcontractor will include in their SWIMS or traffic management plan emergency procedures applicable to the type of work being undertaken. Section 2.20.6. Information regarding traffic management will be relayed to workers by way of toolbox meetings, pre-start meetings, and build pass electronic alerts as required. Section 2.20.7. On-site traffic management will be supported by a vehicle movement plan. A vehicle movement plan will be established for ground-level works and will focus on on-site works not otherwise addressed in a traffic management plan.
Section 2.21. Psychosocial hazards. Section 2.21.1. Psychosocial hazards are factors in the design or management of work that increase the risk of work-related stress and can lead to psychological or physical harm. Examples of psychosocial hazards might include poor supervisor support or high job demands. Section 2.21.2. Employees may be exposed to a combination of psychosocial hazards. There is a greater risk of work-related stress when psychosocial hazards combine and act together, so employers should not consider hazards in isolation. Section 2.21.3. Psychosocial hazards do not necessarily reveal the causes of work-related stress. Causes are likely to be specific to the employee, work, or workplace. Senior management should identify which psychosocial hazards negatively affect employees' health and well-being and take appropriate action to control the impact of those hazards. Section 2.21.4. Workplace bullying can have an impact on an individual's health and affect their ability to do their job. It can also contribute to loss of productivity, staff turnover, absenteeism, low morale, and financial costs. Section 2.21.5. Threats to harm someone, acts of violence, physical and sexual assault, property damage, and stalking are criminal matters that should be referred to the police. Section 2.21.6. All reported and suspected cases of psychosocial hazards and bullying will be investigated by the site manager and/or the project manager. These cases will be treated as an incident investigation. Section 2.21.7. The Hallmarc Employee Assistance Program is available to all employees. See Appendix D for details.
Section 2.22. Hazardous manual handling. Section 2.22.1. Hazardous manual handling is work which requires a person to use force to lift, lower, push, pull, carry, move, hold, or restrain something. It's hazardous manual handling if it involves repeated or sustained application of force, sustained awkward posture, repeated movements, single or repeated use of high force, where it would be reasonable that the person may have difficulty undertaking it. For example, lifting a heavy object, exposure to sustained vibration, or handling loads that are unstable, unbalanced, or hard to hold or grasp. Section 2.22.2. Employers must identify any work involving hazardous manual handling. If there is a risk of a musculoskeletal disorder, then the risk must be controlled, as far as reasonably practicable using the hierarchy of control.
Section 2.23. Young and inexperienced workers. Section 2.23.1. Hallmarc will seek to ensure subcontractors have provided young and inexperienced employees with the information, instruction, training, and supervision needed for them to do their job safely. Section 2.23.2. Correctly and safely initiating young and inexperienced workers may include a buddy system alongside an experienced worker, non-hazardous tasks, and enhanced supervision. Hallmarc will seek to identify at-risk workers during the induction process. Section 2.23.3. It is acknowledged that young workers may be subject to an increased possibility of bullying. Any victim of, or witness to bullying must report this to Hallmarc Site Management immediately.
Section 2.24. Personal protective equipment. Section 2.24.1. It is recognized that personal protective equipment (PPE) is the lowest level of protection and least reliable control on the hierarchy of control. Section 2.24.2. All workers on site must wear a hard hat, high-visibility clothing and safety boots as a minimum. Other PPE will be per the worker's swims or as required by the task.
Section 2.25. Crystalline silica. Section 2.25.1. Construction tasks that may generate respirable crystalline silica include but are not limited to concrete cutting, sawing, drilling, and grinding, jackhammering and chipping, demolition of concrete or masonry, earthwork involving silica-containing soils, and sanding or abrasive blasting using silica-containing materials. Section 2.25.2. If unsure whether a product contains crystalline silica, check the Safety Data Sheet, SDS, or other information from the manufacturer or supplier. Section 2.25.3. Common materials and their typical crystalline silica content include sandstone, 70 to 90%, granite, 25 to 60%, ceramic tiles, 5 to 45%, autoclaved aerated concrete, 20 to 40%, slate, 20 to 40%, concrete, less than 30%, porcelain, 14 to 18%, brick, 5 to 15%, marble, less than 5%. Section 2.25.4. Before starting a crystalline silica process, a subcontractor must identify whether the crystalline silica processes are high-risk work. This must be done by conducting a risk assessment or by choosing to treat that work as high-risk work without doing a risk assessment. If doing a risk assessment, subcontractor must consider the following factors: the specific tasks or processes required to be undertaken with material that contains crystalline silica, the form of crystalline silica to be used, for example, brick, concrete or crushed rock, the proportion of crystalline silica contained in the material, the previous atmospheric monitoring results, the likely frequency and duration of exposure to crystalline silica dust, and any information about incidents, illnesses, or diseases associated with exposure to crystalline silica dust at the workplace. Section 2.25.5. A SWMS and/or methodology must be provided to Hallmarc and approved for implementation on site.
Section 2.26. Hazardous and dangerous goods. Section 2.26.1. In the circumstance that a safety data sheet identifies a product to be hazardous or dangerous, that product and its use will be risk assessed with the aid of the SDS. Section 2.26.2. The hazardous and dangerous material used by a subcontractor will be listed in the subcontractor SWMS along with risk controls for use. Section 2.26.3. Hazardous and dangerous material will be correctly stored, separated and secured in accordance with SDS instructions and statutory requirements. Section 2.26.4. SDSs will be readily available in either hard copy or electronic format.
Section 2.27. Concrete cutting, coring, drilling and grinding. Section 2.27.1. A concrete cutting permit must be sought by the subcontractor before all concrete cutting, coring, drilling and grinding. This permit will be issued by the site manager using the BuildPass app. Section 2.27.2. The purpose of the permit is to establish that the work area is clear of services, structural integrity will not be affected, correct isolation procedures are in place, spotters are in place, dust suppression, and crystalline silica controls are present. The works are covered in a SWMS and the correct PPE is being worn. Section 2.27.3. It must never be assumed by any party that a concrete cutting permit is not necessary.
Section 2.28. Hot works. Section 2.28.1. Subcontractors will seek from Hallmarc Site Management a hot works permit for any work process that involves a naked flame, creates sparks, or extreme heat. Section 2.28.2. The purpose of the hot works permit is to ensure that all precautions are in place. This might include, but is not limited to, fire extinguisher, removal of flammable material, spotter, SWIMS precautions, and fire authority permits. Section 2.28.3. Hot works on construction sites should not take place on total fire ban days without a permit issued by Fire Rescue Victoria or the Country Fire Authority in place. Such permits allow specific, essential activities like welding, grinding, heating bitumen, or using gas torches during a total fire ban. Note that an FRV or CFA permit does not exempt the holder from any statutory responsibility. Section 2.28.4. It must never be assumed by any party that a hot works permit is not necessary.
Section 2.29. Industrial Relations. Section 2.29.1. Freedom of association is acknowledged and respected. All workers have the right to join, not join, or leave a union. Section 2.29.2. Hallmarc employees will conduct themselves respectfully and politely toward representatives from industry bodies. In the first instance, any reasonable concern or discussion should be heard by site management, and actioned if necessary. Section 2.29.3. If any unreasonable or unlawful attempt to cease or interfere with works is made, Hallmarc Site Management should immediately notify senior Hallmarc management to seek further instruction. Section 2.29.4. WorkSafe and emergency services retain the right to instruct that work cease on site at their discretion.
Section 2.30. Inclement working conditions. Section 2.30.1. It is primarily the responsibility of subcontractors and workers to monitor working conditions and take steps in their practices and SWIMS to avoid risk from inclement working conditions such as heat, rain, wind and dust. Section 2.30.2. For the purpose of health and consistency among subcontractors and workers, a temperature reading of 35 degrees will be considered to constitute inclement weather. At this point, workers may stop work and leave site. Section 2.30.3. Worker facilities should provide for covered access between amenities during rain. For example, a worker should be able to go from a lunchroom to the toilet without going through the rain. Section 2.30.4. Hallmarc's wet weather policy prioritizes safety, stating workers shouldn't work in unsafe rain conditions, but must make the area safe first. If a critical task such as a concrete pour starts before rain, that task can be completed under provisions in the subcontractor's workplace agreement. Section 2.30.5. All plant has Australian standard requirements for safe operating at particular wind speeds. This should be clearly marked on the plant. Hallmarc Site Management will reserve the right to cease work earlier if necessary. Section 2.30.6. If air quality becomes questionable due to issues such as, but not limited to, bushfire smoke, smog, dust and unregulated discharge, consult the EPA website. An air quality reading of very poor should prompt the cessation of outdoor work. Hallmarc Site Management will reserve the right to cease work earlier if necessary. Section 2.30.7. Hot working conditions must be risk assessed on an ongoing basis. Controls such as seeking to work in the shade, provision of drinking water, sunscreen, work rotation, extra breaks, PPE, and more should be considered. Section 2.30.8. Where possible, the work environment should also be air-conditioned, well ventilated and shaded. Section 2.30.9. Regularly check if workers and colleagues are showing signs and symptoms of heat illness or distress. Section 2.30.10. Site management will monitor weather forecasts and act and advise accordingly. This could be in relation to heat, wind and rain. For example, heat, the site manager may schedule indoor work. Rain, the site manager may reschedule a concrete pour. Wind, the site manager may prepare for cranes to be shut down. Section 2.30.11. The 30-30 lightning safety rule is a widely accepted, evidence-based guideline used in Victoria and across Australia. If the time between seeing a flash of lightning and hearing thunder is 30 seconds or less, the storm is within 10 kilometers and is close enough to pose a significant danger. All outdoor work should be suspended immediately, and workers should seek shelter. Notification will be by way of the Build Pass messaging function.
Section 2.31. Drugs and alcohol. Section 2.31.1. Hallmarc does not allow the use of illicit drugs or consumption of alcohol on site regardless of whether this is before, during, or after work hours. Section 2.31.2. Workers must not be affected by drugs or alcohol. Upon suspicion that a worker may be affected by drugs or alcohol, that worker will be requested to cease work. This can include prescription medication. Section 2.31.3. Industry bodies provide a number of drug and alcohol counselling services. A worker may be referred as such. Section 2.31.4. Subcontractors and workers acknowledge that Hallmarc reserves the right to commission drug and alcohol screening at their discretion. This will be undertaken with regard to all legal and statutory obligations.
Section 2.32. Demolition. Section 2.32.1. Prior to demolition works taking place, an occupational hygienist will be engaged to determine the presence or otherwise of any substances that may be hazardous if disturbed. The nature and location of such hazards will be recorded. Section 2.32.2. The hygienist will propose a methodology for removal and disposal to Hallmarc and the removalist before commencement of removal. Section 2.32.3. The demolition contractor will provide Hallmarc with a methodology based on the hierarchy of control that incorporates a SWIMS, engineering reports assessing nearby structures, emergency procedures, and all relevant WorkSafe notifications. All works must be in accordance with relevant compliance codes and standards, and such legislation should be documented in the SWIMS. Section 2.32.4. The demolition contractor will liaise with Hallmarc site management to ensure isolation of all services before commencement. This confirmation must be in writing. Section 2.32.5. Hallmarc will require demolition ITPs to be completed during various stages of the works. Section 2.32.6. Using the hierarchy of control, measures will be in place to create exclusion zones and to protect workers and the public from hazards including, but not limited to, falls from height, falling objects and unauthorized entry.